If someone told you that one unexpected message on a quiet Sunday evening could change the course of two lives forever, you might roll your eyes and keep scrolling. But that is exactly where this love story begins, with a girl staring at her phone, a boy across the city staring at the same screen, and both of them having no idea that everything they thought they knew about love was about to be tested in ways they were not ready for. It started with Emma, the kind of girl people notice even when she tries to disappear into the background. She was never the loudest in the room, never the one who needed everyone's attention. Instead, she had this quiet energy, the kind that pulled people in without them even realizing it. She loved late evenings, soft music in her earbuds, and watching the world from her bedroom window, like life was a movie and she was just trying to understand the plot. On that Sunday, she was tired from a long week of classes and work, scrolling through social media without really seeing anything until a notification slid down her screen with a name that made her heart pause for just a second: Liam. Liam had been in her life for almost 3 years already, but this story did not begin like a fairy tale. They did not bump into each other in some perfect moment. They met in the most unromantic way possible: group work. They were thrown together during their first year of college, part of a team project that everyone secretly hated, and somehow, between late-night video calls, messy group chats, and shared frustration about deadlines, they found a strange comfort in each other's presence. Liam was the opposite of Emma in all the ways that mattered. He was loud, funny, always making people laugh, the kind of guy who turned boring lectures into stories. But beneath the jokes, there was a softness in him, something only a few people ever saw. Emma was one of those people. At first, they were just classmates. Then they were friends who talked too much. Then they were something in between, that confusing space where your heart already understands what's happening, but your mind keeps pretending not to notice. Late-night messages turned into daily calls, that turned into walking each other home, that turned into long hugs that lasted a second too long. Everyone around them could see it before they did. When they finally admitted that they wanted more, it wasn't a big dramatic confession. It was a quiet shift, a gentle decision. They just started acting like two people who belonged to each other. For a long time, their love felt simple. Not perfect, but safe. They had their routines. Morning texts that always started with something small, like asking if the other had slept well. Afternoon updates about classes and annoying teachers. Evening calls where they talked about dreams that felt too big and fears they were afraid to say out loud to anyone else. They laughed a lot. They argued sometimes, mostly about small things, like him being late or her overthinking everything. But they always found their way back to each other, and every time they did, it felt like proof that they were strong, that they were different from other couples who fell apart. But the thing about love is that it is never as simple as we want it to be. Real love gets tested. It is pulled, stretched, and sometimes it feels like it might snap. The first crack in their story did not look like a crack at all. It started with Liam's dream. He had always talked about leaving their city, going somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunities. He wanted to work in a different country, to prove to himself that he could succeed somewhere far away. Emma listened to him every time he spoke about it, feeling proud of him and scared at the same time. Proud because he was brave. Scared because in every version of his dream, she never quite knew where she fit. Then one afternoon, his dream stopped being just words. He got an email with a subject line that made his hands shake. He had been accepted into a one-year internship abroad, the kind of opportunity that only came once. When he told Emma, his voice was full of excitement and fear all at once. She felt both of those things too, like a wave crashing in her chest. She was happy for him, genuinely. But behind her smile, another question followed her everywhere. What happens to us? At first, they convinced themselves that nothing had to change. People did long distance all the time. They told each other that love was enough, that they were strong enough. They bought headphones with better microphones so they could talk more clearly. They promised to call every day, to share photos, to stay involved in each other's lives. They went out more, trying to collect memories like souvenirs before he left. Every hug felt heavier. Every goodbye, even on normal days, carried a quiet pain they did not dare to name. The night before Liam's flight, They sat on a bench in their favorite park. The air was cold enough to make them lean closer. They watched the city lights flicker and reflect on the dark river. They did not say everything they were feeling, but both of them knew this night would replay in their minds over and over later. Emma wanted to ask him not to go, to stay and choose her instead of the unknown. But she knew that one day he would resent her for it. So she held his hand tighter instead, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they stayed like that for a long time, memorizing the shape of each other's presence. And then he left. The first weeks of long distance felt almost romantic in their own way. The calls were long and deep, full of descriptions about his new city, the busy streets, the different food, the people from all over the world. He sent her pictures of sunsets from his apartment window. She sent him videos of their old coffee shop, their university campus, the places that still had his shadow in them. They missed each other, but the missing felt beautiful somehow, like proof that what they had was real. But slowly, life started getting in the way. The time difference meant that when Emma woke up, Liam was often already busy. When he finally had a free moment, it was late at night for her, and she was exhausted from work and studying. Sometimes their calls were short and rushed. Sometimes they were canceled altogether. She tried to be understanding. He tried to be present. But there were days when she stared at her phone, watching the empty chat, feeling like she was waiting for someone who existed in another world now. Then came the first fight that really hurt. It was a Saturday. Emma had spent the whole day thinking about their video call in the evening. She had done her makeup even though she wasn't going anywhere, put on his old hoodie, the one that still held a faint memory of his scent. She set up her laptop, fixed the lighting, even adjusted her hair a few times. The minutes passed. The call never came. 2 hours later, her phone finally lit up. A short message from Liam, apologizing, saying he had gotten caught up with new friends and time had slipped away. He said he was tired, that they could talk tomorrow. On the screen, those words looked harmless. In her chest, they landed like a heavy stone. She told herself to be calm, to be understanding. But she could not stop the questions from appearing in her mind. Was she already becoming an option instead of a priority? Was their relationship starting to fade into the background of his new life? The next day, when they finally talked, the conversation started normal but turned tense quickly. He felt guilty, defensive. She felt hurt, fragile. She tried to explain that it wasn't just one missed call. It was the feeling of slowly losing their connection. He tried to say that he was doing his best, that he was tired, that he was under pressure. The words moved in circles. Emotions rose like waves smashing against each other. By the end of the call, both of them were quiet, both of them knowing they had just crossed into a different part of their story, one where love did not always feel safe anymore. Weeks passed. Some days were good. They laughed. They planned their future. They reminded each other of the reasons they had held on for so long. Other days were heavy. Messages were delayed, replies were short, and silence grew in the spaces between their words. Emma started overthinking every small change. Was he replying slower? Was he less excited to call? She hated herself for feeling jealous when he talked about his new friends, about the girl from his internship who always understood his jokes, because she was there with him when Emma couldn't be. Then that Sunday evening came, the one that changed everything. Emma was sitting on her bed, scrolling through social media, when a photo appeared on her screen. It was an image someone had posted from a party in Liam's new city. Her eyes scanned the picture casually at first, until they stopped on something that made her blood run cold. In the center of the photo was Liam, standing close to a girl Emma had never seen before. They weren't kissing. They weren't doing anything obviously wrong. But the way his arm rested around the girl's shoulders, the way she leaned into him, their faces too close and too comfortable, told a story that didn't need words. Her heartbeat quickened. Her hands shook as she zoomed in, as if the pixels might reveal some hidden truth. She tried to remind herself that one photo didn't mean anything, but her mind, already full of doubts and fears, started writing its own painful script. She checked the timestamp. She remembered that this was the same night he had canceled their call because he was tired. That was when Liam's message appeared at the top of her screen, like, Someone had pressed play on a movie at the worst possible moment. He was telling her about his day, saying that he missed her. She stared at his words, then at the photo, and something inside her cracked. She did not yell. She did not send angry voice notes. Instead, she sent the photo to him with a simple question, asking who the girl was and why he hadn't mentioned the party. On the other side of the world, Liam froze when he saw the picture. He knew what it looked like. He knew exactly how much it would hurt her. The girl in the photo was just a friend, someone from his group who had pulled him into the frame last second. At least, that's what he told himself. Deep down, he knew there was more to it, not in what had happened between them, but in what had been missing between him and Emma lately. He had started laughing more with people there, spending less time on his phone, telling himself that it didn't mean he loved Emma any less. But seeing that photo through her eyes forced him to admit that his choices had consequences. Their argument that night was not loud, but it was intense. Emma's words were sharp with hurt. She told him that she felt like she wasn't a part of his real life anymore, just someone he updated when he had time. Liam said he was trying, that she was being unfair, that she did not understand how hard everything was. Both of them spoke from wounds instead of from love. At some point, she asked him a question that had been growing quietly inside her. If he really saw a future with her, if this distance was still worth fighting for. He hesitated, just for a second, but she felt it like a punch. That hesitation stayed with her long after the call ended. Over the next days, their messages became colder. Not rude, not cruel, just distant. Two people trying to protect themselves from feeling too much. Emma cried at night, but during the day, she pretended everything was fine. Liam went out more, trying to drown his guilt and confusion in noise and new experiences. They were still together, technically, but in reality, something between them had broken, and neither of them knew how to fix it. Then came the message that would change the direction of their story again. Emma was sitting on a bus, heading home after a long day, when her phone vibrated. It was Liam. His message was longer than usual, almost like a letter. He said he needed to be honest with her and with himself. He admitted that the distance was crushing him, that he felt guilty all the time, that he did not know how to be fully present in his new life and fully present for her at the same time. He said he loved her, but he was scared that holding on like this was hurting them more than helping. He suggested that maybe, just maybe, they should take a break. Those words felt like the ground opening beneath her feet. She read the message over and over, hoping the meaning would change if she looked at it from a different angle. A break. He was not saying he didn't love her. He was not saying goodbye. But it felt like a quiet ending anyway. The bus moved through the city, people around her talking and laughing, while inside, everything went silent. That night, she didn't beg him to stay. She didn't try to convince him that they could fix it. She was too tired, too hurt. She simply agreed, telling him that maybe he was right, that maybe they needed space to think. When they said goodnight, it sounded too final. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of her life. Suddenly, her days no longer had his messages woven into them. There were no calls, no updates about his life, no silly memes sent in the middle of a boring lecture. She tried to fill the silence with anything she could. She spent more time with friends, picked up extra shifts at work, listened to new playlists, just so old songs wouldn't remind her of him. But grief doesn't obey schedules. It showed up unexpectedly. When she passed their favorite cafe, when she saw a couple holding hands, when she looked at the hoodie still hanging on her chair. Liam struggled too, even if no one around him saw it. For the first few days, he felt relief mixed with pain, like a weight had been lifted but had left a deep bruise behind. He threw himself into work, into parties, into the chaos of his new life. People told him he seemed happier, more relaxed. He laughed, but inside, he felt like he was running from something he couldn't get away from. Every time he saw a sunset from his window, he thought about how he used to send those photos to Emma. Every time something funny happened, his first instinct was still to tell her, until he remembered that he'd chosen not to. They had agreed not to talk for a while, to really give themselves space. But love is stubborn. It lingers in the small, ordinary moments that no one else notices. One rainy evening, months later, Emma was cleaning her room when she found a box she had pushed under her bed. Inside were printed photos of her and Liam movie tickets, small notes he had once left in her notebooks, little physical reminders of moments that had once felt so normal and now felt like pieces of a lost life. She sat on the floor, the sound of rain tapping on her window, and allowed herself to remember everything without trying to push it away. The good, the bad, all of it. She realized something important that night. Yes, he had hurt her. Yes, the distance had broken something between them. But she had changed too. She had learned how to stand on her own feet, how to live without waiting for someone else to message her before she could feel okay. She still loved him, but she was not the same girl who had watched him leave, hoping that love would simply be enough. She knew now that love needed effort, honesty, and sometimes hard choices. On the other side of the world, Liam had his own moment of truth. He was at a crowded party, music loud, people talking all around him, when he suddenly felt completely alone. He stepped outside for some air, the city lights blurring slightly as he blinked. He realized that he had spent months trying to convince himself that letting go had been the right decision, but he had never actually faced what he had lost. He took out his phone and opened their old chat, scrolling up through their conversations, their jokes, their plans. He saw the moment when everything had started to shift, the photo, the fight, the break. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he hadn't just been a victim of circumstances. He had made choices that hurt her, that pushed her away. By the time his internship ended and he returned to their city, a full year had passed since that night on the park bench. He walked through the familiar streets, everything looking the same and completely different at the same time. He didn't know if he had the right to seek her out. He didn't know if she would want to see him. But the regret in his chest told him he had to at least try to make things right, whatever that ended up meaning. Emma, meanwhile, had built a quieter kind of peace. She still thought of him sometimes, but the thoughts no longer tore her apart. They were like old photographs, soft around the edges, no longer sharp enough to cut. She had started new routines, met new people, and slowly learned how to love her life again, not because everything was perfect, but because she had survived what once felt impossible. When Liam finally reached out to her, it was with a simple message. Nothing dramatic, nothing poetic. Just a few words asking how she had been, saying that he was back in the city. Her heart reacted before her mind did, beating faster, pulling up memories she had folded away. She stared at his name on her screen, surprised by how many emotions still lived in those 4 letters. She could have ignored him. She could have replied with cold distance. Instead, after a long pause, she answered with honesty. She told him that she was okay, that life had moved forward, that she had changed. He asked carefully if she would be willing to meet, just to talk. After a lot of thinking, she agreed, not because she wanted to go back to how things had been, but because she wanted to close the circle properly, to make peace with the story that had defined so much of her heart. They met at the same park where they had spent their last night together before he left. The air was different now, quieter, but the memories were still there in the way the light hit the water, in the shape of the bench where they had once sat side by side. When she saw him walking towards her, there was a strange mix of familiarity and distance. He looked the same, and yet not. There was a new seriousness in his eyes, a weight she hadn't seen before. She had changed too. She carried herself differently, like someone who had learned how to hold her own heart more gently. Their conversation was not like the ones they used to have. There were no rush jokes, no easy banter. Instead, there was honesty. He apologized, not with excuses, not with half-truths, but with the kind of vulnerability that only comes from losing something you never stopped loving. He told her that he had been selfish, that he had tried to hold on and let go at the same time, and that in the process, he had broken the one thing he never wanted to lose. She listened quietly, tears in her eyes, but not falling yet. When she spoke, she did not try to hurt him back. She told him what it had felt like on her side of the distance. The waiting, the doubts, the photo, the message suggesting a break. She admitted that there were days when she hated him, and days when she missed him so much it felt like a physical ache. But she also told him about the person she had become because of that pain. Someone stronger, more honest with herself, less afraid of being alone. The question of whether they would get back together hung in the air between them, unspoken but heavy. He wanted to ask. She could feel it, but she also knew that going back would mean pretending the break had never happened, pretending they were still the same people. And they weren't. In the end, their story didn't end with a dramatic kiss or a clean goodbye. It ended with something quieter, but maybe more powerful: understanding. They both accepted that what they had was real and beautiful and flawed. That they had loved each other deeply, and that love had not been enough to save them from distance, fear, and human mistakes. But it had been enough to change them. As they got up from the bench and started walking back, side by side but with a small space between them, Emma felt something she hadn't expected: peace. She realized that sometimes the people we love the most are not meant to stay forever. Sometimes they are there to help us become who we were always meant to be, even if that journey hurts. Liam walked beside her, feeling the same mix of sadness and gratitude. He knew he would always carry her with him, not as a regret, but as a reminder of what love really requires: presence, courage, honesty. He wished he had learned those lessons earlier, but at least he had learned them. Their paths eventually split at the edge of the park. They stood facing each other, both knowing this was more than just the end of a walk. It was the end of a chapter that had shaped them in ways they would still be discovering years later. They said goodbye, not as strangers, not as lovers, but as two people who once shared a whole world and were now brave enough to let each other go. And if you're listening to this and wondering what the point of their story is, maybe it's this: love is not always about holding on at any cost. Sometimes, the most powerful kind of love is the one that allows both hearts to grow, even if it means growing apart. Sometimes, the person you thought was your forever becomes the reason you finally learn how to be enough for yourself. But here's the quiet secret hidden at the end of his story. Years later, in a different cafe, in a different part of the city, Emma would once again feel her phone vibrate. She would look down and see a message from an unknown number, a kind stranger she had met by accident in the most unexpected way. She would smile, not because she was forgetting Liam, but because she had finally made room in her heart for a new beginning. And somewhere across town, Liam would be sitting with a notebook, writing down the lessons he had learned, ready to love someone again with the honesty he wished he had back then. Their story did not end with them together, but it did end with both of them better, braver, and more ready for the kind of love that doesn't just feel good in the beginning, but stays honest when life gets hard. Because in the end, real love is not just about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person, even when the story doesn't go the way you thought it would.